Hello there and welcome to the video. We are doing another strategy pattern video, and this time we're doing one that I like to call the Giri pin, named after Anish Giri. And at the end of the video we'll see the example, which, well, I think it's one of the nicest examples of this theme that I've seen. So I thought it was nice to name the pattern after that game. But let's start with looking at what we're talking about. So this position, white to move. We see that white has a strong bishop here. And we also see that this bishop is putting a nice pin here on the knight. So the king is stuck defending the knight. So black would like to get out of the pin. And the only way to do that would be to play pawn to g5. And then move the king up. So white has to prevent black from doing that. So this is a very useful pattern. If you can pin the knight and you have the pawns like this and the king behind like this, then there are certain things that suggest that this pin might be stuck forever, especially if you have few pieces left on the board. In this case, white should play pawn to h4. And the idea is not to allow g5. If g5, we're going to take it, it's still pinned, and then we take the knight with either the bishop or the pawn, most likely the pawn. So black's options are to do nothing, but he kind of can't do that because this can't move, this can't move, this can't move, and only this and this can move, but we saw what happened here. So there's only the h pawn, h6 or h5. h6 tries to, buckle up, but g4, we're threatening g5, and notice that on g5 by black, we don't take, we play h5, we take away the g6 square from the king, and now black is in zugzwang. If he had other pawns, he could now exhaust the pawn moves, but at the end of that, he's going to lose this knight. So that's the essence of this theme, that the knight is lost because of zugzwang. Black could also try after h4 to play h5, but white can just play any move. King f2, g3, doesn't really matter. Black is again in zugzwang, has to move the pawn or move the king. And we win again, the knight. So a very useful pin. And this pin can actually be useful against all of the non-diagonal pieces. So for instance, if black is attacking here, there's a white rook on f3. The rook is a non-diagonal piece, it can't go on diagonal, so queen e4 is a strong pin. And this would be a similar situation. White can't get out of this, the king can't move, the rook can't move, he can only move the pawns. If he moves the g-pawn, we don't take it, we play h4. Take away the square, and white will be in zugzwang. He might play this move, but a simple pawn move, or any queen move on the diagonal, and then we take the rook, next move. So this is a very useful pin. And note that whether or not the black king has any moves, like here it doesn't have any moves because if it moves an f8 queen. But if you get this zugzwang, then black is simply, so if we go back here, similar situation, black plays g5, he's threatening g4, white doesn't have anything, has to play here, and again we just play this move, and white is in zugzwang. Again, even if he had pawns, we would simply move the queen wherever we need to on the diagonal, and then pick up the rook. So the h pawn can be useful. It can also be useful to have an f pawn. This example is for black. Again, this fateful pin here. White can't really move anything. If he moves the h pawn, we're going to bring the king. Bring the king to g4, and then take the knight. And if we play g4, then we play f4. Just like the h pawn, this time we use the f pawn, and we take the square away. So this king will be stuck because we are covering this square with the pawn. Fatal pin here on f3. Now let's get some practical examples. First one is from Mikhail Konopka and Josef Obsevak. I'll put all of the examples in a library on chess.com, and I'll link to it in the description below if you want to have a look at these games and these examples. So here white started the pin bishop to e5, putting the pin here on the knight. which, well, immediately puts pressure here. So black chopped off a pair of rooks. Played rook e8, hitting the bishop, which retreats. And now we have to address this threat of g5. So black played g5, but now rook f1, putting more pressure on the knight. Rook e6, protecting, bishop g2, getting time because we are hitting this pawn. And now h4, threatening to take, and we don't have time for king g6. King g6, simply h5. And we know the situation, he's going to be back into the pin. Black played h6, and the white wasn't in a rush, he played h4, b4. Bishop b3, and only now h5. And now we see that this pin is basically eternal. This bishop is going to stay on this diagonal, pin this bishop, and there's simply not anything that black can do about it. So he's going to stay here and pin this guy. And the end of the game was bishop c4, rook f2, no rush by white, a5, he took it, and then simply sheltered the a pawn here with bishop to b7. This pawn is coming, but only after a rook takes f6. And again, a non-diagonal piece, so the pin remains, the rook can't move, the king can't move. Rook shrine for black, and this pawn will simply queen, and well, if you take it, then you're down a piece, and you will soon be down 2 pieces. Okay, so in this position, black played rook takes g2. Now, having looked at what we just looked at, this is a nice puzzle for you to try to solve before I show you. So I suggest you pause the video and try to find how does white, well, get a pretty nice situation, a situation that we are familiar with by now. And I'll count down from 3, a 3, a 2, a 1. Here is the solution. Rook to e8, Czechoslovakia. Only one move, king b7. And now the super strong move, rook takes e4. Giving up the rook for the bishop because we can put this pin, boom, on the knight on c6. b5 is the immediate threat. So black responded with b5. White first increased the pressure, rook c1. And then of course he played a4, correct? Trying to increase the pressure and also intending a5. So again, if king b6, a5. I mean, black probably does best just to take it, to get 2 pawns. If he goes back, then we have this, eternal pin. Nothing to be done. We're going to bring the king, and we'll finish very similarly to what happened in the game. In the game, after a4, a6, white took on c6. A very strong move, because if you don't take, there's going to be a discovered check. So black took it, but a5, king is stuck. This is such a beautiful pattern. And we're simply going to take and then march our f-pawn off the board. And well, black basically has to lose this rook, so we're going to win the rook as well. Pretty good deal. So what kind of brought my attention to this particular pattern was this fantastic example by Anish Giri. He's playing against the talented and very strong Israeli grandmaster Maxim Rodshtein. And well, for the moment Rodshtein is up a pawn, but Anish is about to perhaps win this pawn, then try to use his a-pawn. And black did not like his knight on the rim, so he tried to bring it back, bishop to knight f6, but this allowed, like I spoiled, bishop to d4. And now the pin is emerging. This will be difficult for black to get out of. He played b5, rook to a5, black attacked the bishop, attacked it again, but now if you attack it for a third time, I can take the pawn. And once I take the pawn, the a-pawn can start running. So black went back, rook to c5. And now a simply fantastic concept here by Anish. So what did white play here? Note that h4 is also a very strong move for white, but that's not the move that Anish played. So what did Anish Giri play here? I think this is simply fantastic. He played a4. Boom. And if you have a slow computer at first, it will simply not get it. It will think this is a draw. It will take the pawn. You don't really have a choice, because otherwise take with the rook, and again the a-pawn is starting to run. And still we have the pin down here. So black took on a4. And what was Anish intending here? You guessed it, the Giri pin. Took on c5, pawn takes. And now, actually 2 moves win, but I like Anish's move. He played f4. Very clean. h4 wins as well. The idea is simply that g5 is not allowed because of f5. And note how utterly useless these 2 pawns are, because they're simply on the bishop's diagonal. The bishop stays on this diagonal. It controls both the pawns, and it keeps the pin. So nothing to be done after a3, bishop a1. Black actually resigned. He has no moves. He can exhaust the pawn moves. It doesn't matter. Eventually has to move something, and we can basically do anything. g4, threatening g5, and then f5. And this knight will be lost, and the bishop will be in time to control everything. The king is active, and white should win. So a fantastic example. I really like this. A nice strategy pattern to keep in mind. It can be very helpful in endgames. I've had this many times where you're able to pin the rook with the queen, and this can be very important in blitz games and such. So something to keep in mind and something to add to your arsenal, and I wish you the best of luck and see you next time. Bye bye.